This is the OFN Today on the Orlads Football Network as we talk Tennessee Titans football with Teresa Walker. She is with the Associated Press. She is an award-winning writer. She was with us when the season began to talk Tennessee Titans football. And Teresa, the Titans made the postseason once again. Unfortunately, not as successful as the 2019 season, which means it was not a successful season.
Well, but it was successful in that they won the division, something they had
True.
not done since 2008, so 12 years. They also got a home playoff game. Now, in a pandemic, didn't mean quite as much. I think the attendance was 15% at that game against the Ravens. So they scratched a couple things that the first things that were on their list, they took care of. Unfortunately, they did not win that game. The defense actually played better than it had much of the season, and the offense had their worst performance of the season low in points, I think it was, and the season low in yards almost. But they just didn't. The Ravens had an answer for them. How tough it is tough to beat a team 3 straight times.
Yes.
Now, granted, one of those was in the divisional round last January, and then they go up there in November and pull out a game in overtime. So hey, Ravens were determined not to let them beat them. And Lamar Jackson did the one thing that he hadn't been able to do, and that was to make passes to the outside. The Titans were kind of daring him, trying to bottle him up in the middle because it worked for 2 wins. And this time he was able to make the plays with his feet and with his arm to pull out that win. And the sad thing is, almost any other game of the season, the Titans hold the opponent to that few points.
Yep.
The offense is usually going to score. I mean, they were second in total yards per game and were the 4th best scoring team in the NFL, and they couldn't come through on that day. So, the challenge is going to be how much do they address that the defensive side of the ball. Thanks to the final game in Houston, they didn't finish last in the NFL in sacks per game, but they sure could see it from where they were. And the one thing we saw from the Bucs in the NFC Championship, the Super Bowl, is how valuable having guys that not just affect the quarterback, but guys who can flat out beat somebody,
Yep.
get the quarterback on the ground. It's valuable. It's the kind of thing that just doesn't go out of style.
Yeah, Landry led the team with just 5.5 sacks. The Vic Beasley signing was a disaster. He was let go. Clowney, that didn't really work out. He was okay, but no sacks. I don't think you want to bring someone like Jadeveon Clowney to your team and you don't get a sack out of him. That's just not why the team brought him in. So yeah, and no defensive coordinator, and that was something that we talked about in the preseason. And with terrible on 3rd down, that was just a huge story for the team all season. And if it wasn't for the good performance in the playoff game, generally speaking, you would have, if they would have had a really bad game, it would have been that much more of a story, I think. But most people, I'm sure, in Tennessee just understand, yeah, that might have been okay, but the defense, there's a lot to work on. And starting with naming a defensive coordinator, right?
Absolutely. And now he has addressed that. He promoted Shane Bowen. He officially has the title of defensive coordinator. And the difference is he's not going to be coaching linebackers. He rearranged a couple people on his staff. He brought somebody else in, Kenichi Udeze, who actually had been over at Vanderbilt. So, he's not going to be doing two jobs at the same time, and one of those without the title. So we'll see how much that makes a difference. And and for all that they were bad on, worst in a long time on 3rd down conversions, near the bottom in sacks, they were 7th in takeaways. So they did some things good on defense, just not nearly enough. And they go 11-5, and maybe if they win a game or two during the regular season with some help from their defense, maybe they end up the 3 seed or the 2 seed, which helps them maybe go a little bit further. So that's the thing. So that's what's going to make what they do in free agency and in the draft so important, because they've got to get somebody. And the good thing is, it looks like there's going to be some good pass rushers hitting the free agent market. The thing is that the Titans have got to go spend the money, and this time they spent it last year. They've got to spend it wisely this year and get somebody who can actually get One sack would be a big improvement
right.
over what they got out of their investment last year.
Well, what about John Robinson? Because he's the one that is responsible for the draft and free agency, and he's been there for several years. Is his job safe?
Yeah, I believe he's definitely safe. I mean, he's a Tennessee native.
Okay.
Running this franchise means so much to him. And let's not forget, he's the guy who got Derrick Henry with their third pick in the second round, after trading away the number one pick and, making a whole bunch of moves. He's the guy who found, all Derrick Henry did was become the eighth man to run for 2,000 yards. And the streak he's been on over the last year and a half is just stunning. So, you've got a guy who could if he keeps this up for another year or two, could be running himself into a spot in the Hall of Fame. He drafted Kevin Byard, who's been an All-Pro with the first pick of the third round. So he's gotten some good picks. Jayon Brown is a guy that they want to bring back. He was a fifth-round pick. So, he's done some good work in the draft. It's just this last year, the free agent signings, Clowney, Beasley, just an absolute bust on the money. And then free agents, the draft class last year, really, now maybe it was the pandemic doing things virtually, but they got little to nothing out of their their draft class. Isaiah Wilson, he ended the season, he had 3 offensive snaps, and I think he had a 4th on special teams, but he ended the season on IR, non-football injury, and had a couple of car accidents, was on the COVID list not once but twice. And if you follow him on social media, you kind of wonder at some of the decisions he's been making. And then the rest of their class, there were injuries that just kind of kept them on IR, so didn't see much of Darrington Evans. What we saw late in the season, we liked. Their third round pick, the kid from LSU, he got an interception early in the season, and then injuries, didn't see much of him the rest of the year. So didn't get much out of anything in the year, in 2020 on the guys that they brought in, with the exception of Stephen Gostkowski, who, while it was a bumpy ride at times, he did win the first 3 games of the season for him with his foot. So that's probably the best signing for the team for the year.
Yeah, and it was also 7 of 8 from 50 plus, which is pretty incredible. And
for a guy his age,
and a guy that had some erratic play at times. He missed 7 other attempts, yet only 1 was missed at 50 plus. And speaking of special teams, the last couple of years haven't been that good. Kern seemed to come down a bit in his punting. He's been around forever. Mentioned Gostkowski's a free agent. The return game just hasn't been explosive the last couple of years. Humphreys, of course, was injured. So is there any changes happening within the special teams unit or coaching staff?
Not on the coaching staff, not at this point. But, Brett Kern, part of the problem last year was, he got put on IR because he got hit in the Cincinnati game. Their long snapper, who they cut, pretty quickly after that, had been on the COVID list. And he'd been struggling anyway before going on the COVID list. And he was part of that big outbreak that they had. And he had a bad snap, and there was a play, and Brett Kern took a big hit that helped land him on the IR. This special teams has long been a strong point for this franchise since they moved to Tennessee. From Al Del Greco to Joe Nedney to Rob Baronis, Ryan Suckup, Gostkowski, and then the punter, Craig Hendrick to Brett Kern. It's been a smoothless transitions over these times. But this year, a year ago, they couldn't kick to save their lives on field goals, went through 5 different kickers. This year, the whole unit seemed to just kind of struggle. So very curious to see what they can do to improve that area. Both on the returning. You mentioned Humphreys. I'll say this, he finished the season still in the concussion protocol on IR. He's a guy with 2 years left on his deal. I won't be surprised at all if he's a guy that they decide to let go to create some much needed cap space this season. So all we know is that they have to get better. Rick Gosselin's rankings, I think he had him like 24th in the league. And for this franchise, that's a stunningly low number for this franchise.
And speaking of more special teams or salary cap, mentioned Humphreys. Apparently his contract is one of those that are conducive to, okay, we're going to let you go. We're going to save some money, as you said. It doesn't look good, though, when you're taking a look just from the outside. You see a 21st in cap space. doesn't look good, but what can they do, or what is going to happen, do you think, between now and the beginning of free agency to open up some more cap space?
Well, I'm expecting some deals to be reworked. I mean, there's Taylor Lewan's got a big deal. Kevin Byard. Shoot, Malcolm Butler. I mean, he played pretty well. I
Yeah.
mean, he was tied for the team lead with 4 interceptions, but they gave him a big deal. So, work your magic, turn some of that money into signing bonuses, et cetera, and find some more space. An Adam Humphries. Those are the kind of moves that I'm expecting for them to create some space. And they're going to have some hard decisions. Corey Davis is a guy that I think they'd love to have back, but at the right price. And maybe the fact that there's going to be a lot of wide receivers hitting the market could help him give them a chance. And maybe they decide to tag him to try to keep him. If nothing else, maybe the transition tag. There's Jayon Brown, who's hitting free agency. Daquan Jones has been here for, I think, 7 years. He's also a free agent. So, the guys that they've got, Jonnu Smith is somebody, a tight end, had 8 touchdowns for him this last season. That's a guy that just feels like he's going to get more money elsewhere. But the one thing we don't know is, there are teams out there with tons of cap space, but, the cap's going to maybe not drop, as much as the fear was, down to the floor that was set for this year. I mean, I'm seeing numbers like $181 million. We'll see what that ends up being. But yeah, it's not going to be set until real close to the start of free agency. So that's the first place they can do to create some space is, go start reworking their magic and rewriting some deals and start there, because they're going to need some space, because they're going to have some holes to fill that, the draft just won't fill.
Yeah, it does. And it doesn't, unless there's some really big miracles Robinson's going to be able to partake on with the salary cap. It doesn't look like they're going to have enough money to go too crazy or bring in any really top talented players. But if they can just hold on to some of their own, like you mentioned, let's start on offense, because Jonnu Smith, a lot of people thought he was going to break out this past season. It didn't happen. He had his best season, but he just didn't break out. Is he who he is? Is he just that this is the player he's going to be, or do you see more in Jonnu Smith? Because like you said, he could end up getting a contract that is going to be a lot more than the Titans are willing to pay. And another team might look there and say, hey, I think, it only takes one GM. Hey, I know he hasn't broken out yet, but we're going to overpay because I believe if we bring him to our team, he will break out.
I definitely believe that there's more to him. I mean, he was having a good season, and then Taylor Lewan gets hurt. And guess what? They ended up going through like 3 different tackles.
Yes.
Tyson Brownlow gets hurt, and then they end up with David Quesenberry playing for him at left tackle. So they had to give some help at times, and it just felt like at that point, after Taylor Lewan's injury, it almost felt like he got a little lost in the wash, so to speak. I think that if Taylor Lewan had played the whole season, I think that he would have had a better season. And still, 8 touchdowns is nothing to sneeze at as well. So he's a guy that they turn to regularly in the red zone, particularly. So, he's shown good hands. He's shown speed. So, yeah, I definitely think that the arrow is pointing up on Jonnu Smith. So, if I'm a GM, I absolutely take a shot at that. And I do think somebody will probably give him a big deal.
Would you think Smith would be more important than Corey Davis, considering the Titans play a lot of 12 personnel? You got Ferkser's a restricted free agent, Swaim's a free agent, Pruitt's a free agent. So, I mean, you could bring those 3 guys back, and I guess you could be okay, but you don't have that top guy like Smith.
Well, that's a great thing, because if you let either of them go, or if both of them end up leaving and signing elsewhere, then you've got to replace both of them. And, they spent a lot of picks on offense last year. They need to kind of bolster the defense this year through the draft. So, I think that all things being even, they'd love to have them both back. If I had to choose between Corey Davis and Jonnu Smith, I'm probably leaning toward Corey Davis and trying to keep, Michael Pruitt, who's a guy who's had some flashes, and, maybe you can get even more out of him, and then try to find a tight end in the draft. But yeah, if I'm choosing between the two, I'm trying to keep Corey Davis, because, he had some flashes, and he had his production. He was so close to his first 1,000-yard season. Between him and AJ Brown, that's a potent combination, and I'd like to try to keep that together if I'm the Titans.
And that was something the team declined the 5th-year option. But, you never know how
Well,
those things work, though.
I know. Hindsight, they would have declined the 5th-year option on Adoree Jackson, who spent almost the entire season on
Yeah.
IR and only got in for 3-4 games at the end of the season.
Uh-huh.
And you would have, but guess what? When they didn't pick up Corey's option, his production had been underwhelming.
Yes.
Now he had toe surgery at the end of last season and got healthy, which absolutely helped. But that's the thing. The Titans gambled, and they kind of they came up snake eyes.
And that's important too, because there would be a big drop off if Corey Davis is no longer on the team, because there was a big drop off when Humphreys went down. You have AJ Brown and Davis, and then that was it. And now if you remove Corey Davis from the picture, then the team's in that much more trouble. So even though they like to play a lot of tight ends in this offense, I understand why you're saying Corey Davis is a more valuable piece to this offense, because they're going to need to add some more wide receivers to that group, don't they?
Absolutely. I mean, the kid that I'd love to see them be able to get is Elijah Moore out of Ole Miss. AJ Brown is a big fan of him, of course, being an Ole Miss guy, no
Okay.
wonder. But watching Moore's production in the SEC, that's a kid I'd love to see in this offense.
All right. Now, what about a backup for Derrick Henry? Because he has 681 rushing attempts in the last 2 years. That has to slow down a little bit, because you'd like to be able to keep him around at his best for a couple of years, which is where he is right now in his prime. But you mentioned Evans was hurt. Is that what they're going to hope for, is that Evans is healthy and then he could relieve Henry a little bit better in 21?
Absolutely. I mean, they've got their backup. Darrington Evans, when he's healthy, he showed that he could be that nice changeup. He's very fast, and he can run with some power, and he looked good in some of those runs once he got on the field. And I'll go back to this. In the year of a pandemic, rookies, yes, not every rookie was Justin Herbert. Okay, it was just tough for these kids. You're transitioning from college to the NFL,
Yep.
and you're having to work out on your own and do virtual meetings, and then you come to camp, and it was just not easy. So when he was healthy and available, he looked good. You could understand why the Titans took him where they did, because you could see that young man being that nice change-up punch to Derrick Henry.
Yeah, I'm a Jet guy, and the same thing happened to Denzel Mims, and he said it was they were laying around for a month, and then you go out there and then you got to pick up your activity, and he knows that he's going to have to work out a lot more. Now you're with the team, you're a pro, you kind of understand it, so I expect the same thing out of Evans as well. And I completely understand where you're coming from there. Offensive line, very good run blocking unit. They could be a little bit better as a pass blocking unit, but overall, with Luan coming back, do you think that they're pretty set? Where do you think they need to improve?
Well, defense, pass rush, obviously, but on the offensive side, it depends on who they lose. They need a tackle because they drafted Isaiah Wilson. You can't count on him being the guy you need based on what we saw his rookie season.
Okay.
So they need to draft another tackle to be ready there and improve that offensive line depth. Wilson was the guy we thought on paper would replace Dennis Kelly at some point, and you can't count on that. Tight end, because I do think that Johnny Smith is going to be gone in free agency. And so that kind of takes care of that. But, the biggest focus this offseason has got to be on defense. Yeah. They've got to improve their pass rush. They've got to make sure that Daquan Jones is a pending free agent. So if you don't bring him back, you've got to replace him now. And you've got to improve your linebacker depth. So, when Jayon Brown went down, no offense, but Will Compton is a special teams guy. Sure. Nick Zubnar is a special teams guy, and yet they were getting snaps because that's how thin they were at that position. So Rashaan Evans is going into his 4th year, so you need to bolster that. You need to improve your speed there as well. So on the secondary end, I think they're kind of set. Maybe they try to keep Desmond King, but Christian Fulton was drafted to play. So that's another guy going into his 2nd season, should be healthier. And so pass rush, linebacker, and some interior on the defensive line. Those are probably the top points that they're going to have to hit.
And obviously we'll find out with free agency on who they're going to be able to keep and who they won't keep. So by the way, Landry, has he, considering, and I know he wasn't our top guy, but he was a high pick. Has he been okay? Has he been disappointing? How do you judge his career so far?
I'm sorry, which player again?
Landry?
Landry, I think he's done well. I mean, the thing all off season that they talked about was trying to limit his snaps to keep him fresher
Okay.
toward the end of the season. That didn't happen because of the problems with Beasley and Clowney. He was playing, a majority of the snaps, way more than they were intending for him to do. And, when there's nobody on the other side,
Yep.
You can chase all day. We saw it in the Super Bowl. You can chase all you want, but if there's not somebody to come around and force him back into you, you can just keep running for days. And, so I think that they got as much production out of Landry last year that they could, considering they had nothing else. So I think that if they can get, some true help on the other end for him, that I think that he could have be what they want him to be. It's just give the kid some help. And that they haven't been able to do, because their moves have just not panned out.
And Clowney, what's the situation going to be with Clowney?
Well, I think it's going to be interesting. He reportedly had some knee surgery, went to Texas and got better. But, whenever we'd asked Mike Vrabel about it, he just kind of made it clear he wasn't sure. So, if you've got him for a whole off season so that guys know what he's going to do when, you're in a certain situation so they can, react to that and play off each other better, maybe it is more effective. But, if it's, the reports are that it was the knee that he had the microfracture surgery in. I'm making him, I bring him back only if I've got a prove it kind of deal that he'll agree to. So, but if he's looking for the big contract that he didn't get last year, then, I'm waiting and seeing. I'll take my chances elsewhere.
And you mentioned Desmond King. Everybody thought that was a steal for Tennessee. Didn't work out because obviously Tennessee didn't advance to the postseason, but it was only a 6th-round draft pick. Any chance? What are the chances of bringing him back? Because he's a solid player.
Well, the Christian Fulton being on the roster, and I've seen lists where Desmond King's one of the top, he's among the top 5 cornerbacks available. And, he helped himself coming to Tennessee and having some play. Shoot, his first game after being, on Zooms all week, he picks up a fumble and goes to the end zone for a touchdown. I just think that they're, with all the other needs that they've got, I think he's going to sign elsewhere just because somebody's going to offer him more money.
All right. And then finally at safety, Vaccaro, Byard, you mentioned Byard. We know how good he is, but will they try Hooker? Because I also want to know about Hooker, because Hooker seemed like he's just gonna get better and better the more experienced he is. Does Hooker eventually just take away snaps from Vaccaro? How does Hooker fit in with the secondary?
They talked an awful lot about trying to get, do some multiple safety packages. And yeah, they really like Hooker. So it does feel like that he's going to be the guy. Vaccaro's probably going to lose snaps to Hooker.
Okay.
And just curious to see if how long Vaccaro can hold him off for the starting job. Hooker's going into his 3rd year. And, when he's on the field, he just makes plays and produces. So, this could be the season that he passes him by. And, the Titans are, the ones that have to decide, wait, what, is Hooker our guy enough that maybe we decide to cut Vaccaro, who, they gave him a deal not too long ago. So, we're in the off season where some hard, cold business decisions are made.
Absolutely.
So it's something I'm going to be keeping a close eye on because I'm very curious to see how they go.
And who's the slot corner for the team?
Well, that's the thing. We never really saw what they wanted to do. The idea was Butler, Dory Jackson. I think Jackson was going to be their slot guy, and then Fulton would be the guy that ideally on the outside. And then with injuries, that just never really occurred.
Okay.
So, I think that's how they want to go because, Jackson, he's got the speed. He likes playing outside. Fulton is a guy, maybe you decide to let him play inside. So, we just never saw enough to really know how they wanted to play that.
Teresa, thanks a lot. Great job as always. I know you've been real busy. You had the Super Bowl. That was a real busy week for you. I can imagine what would happen if the Titans were in the Super Bowl.
That would have been fun. Maybe they'd be having a parade down Cumberland River like the Bucks are having down there at Tampa Bay today.
Well, still though, you know what? If you're going to have a year where you're not going to make it to the Super Bowl, maybe that was the year not to make it, right? You got to look at it that way.
Oh, absolutely. Are you kidding with the socially distanced press box? Last year AP had 10 or 12 people at the game. This year we had 4 people in person and then a whole cast, working Zoom land. So, yeah, this was definitely a year to skip. The weather would have been nice, though.
Yeah, that's true. But you don't always get lucky. Teresa,
True.
I appreciate it. Tennessee sports writer, Hall of Fame writer. You've always been gracious to come on our show here. We look forward to getting an opportunity, though, to talk to you once again sometime, in between free agency and the draft when we have a better idea of what the roster is going to look like.
That sounds great.